Dear learners, welcome you all to e-learning platform. This is week 12, the last week of the semester. In this week you are going to learn the character analysis and critical appreciation of the novel Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Let's begin. So, character analysis and critical appreciation of the novel Pride and Prejudice. The major character, the protagonist, Elizabeth Bennet, who is also known as Eliza or Lizzy. The nicknames appeared in the novel as Eliza and Lizzy. The novel's heroine and the second oldest of the 5 Bennet sisters. Elizabeth is smart, lively, and attractive. She prides herself on her ability to analyze other people, but she is very often mistaken in her conclusions about their motivations. To her credit, though, she is eventually able to overcome her own prejudice. Elizabeth places little value on money and social position. Instead, she prizes a person's independence of character and personal virtue. Although she is drawn to Darcy, she resists him based on her own mistaken preconceptions about him. Fitzwilliam Darcy, Bingley's closest friend, the brother of Georgiana and the nephew of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Darcy is very wealthy and a person of great integrity, but his extreme class consciousness makes him appear vain and proud. He finds Elizabeth attractive, even ideal, but is clumsy in expressing his feelings and disdains her sometimes crass family. Elizabeth's harsh appraisal of him compels him to reassess his behavior and attitudes. Her intelligence and her disregard for mere social rank teaches him to see people more for who they are, rather than the status into which they are born. Jane Bennet, the oldest of the Bennet sisters. Jane seems almost too good to be true. Beautiful, sweet-tempered, and modest. Her sole fault is that she refuses to think badly of anyone. She always looks on the bright side and is quick to defend someone when Elizabeth suspects them of having shortcomings. George Wickham. Wickham is an officer in the local military regiment and appears to be the very model of a gentleman. In reality, he is a liar, hypocrite, and an opportunist. He thinks nothing of ruining a young woman's reputation and is instead much more concerned with paying off his massive gambling debts. Mrs. Bennet. Mrs. Bennet is a giddy, frivolous woman whose only purpose in life seems to be gossiping and marrying off her 5 daughters. She lacks any awareness of her vulgar conduct and embarrasses Elizabeth and Jane to no end. Her behavior depicts what can happen to women when they lack an education and the ability to think for themselves. Mr. Bennet. Though a discerning, well-educated man, Mr. Bennet has made a bad marriage and is resigned to endure it. He is a good-hearted person but fails his family by remaining sarcastically detached. Everything is a joke to him. This leads to poor judgment, as when he does not interfere between Lydia and Wickham. Charles Bingley. Bingley is Darcy's best friend and the brother of Caroline Bingley and Mrs. Hurst. Unlike Darcy, however, Bingley is down to earth. Despite his huge wealth, he is humble and modest, placing no great weight on social standing. Lydia Bennet, the youngest of the Bennet sisters. Lydia is a vain, empty-headed flirt who has never had to deal with the consequences of her actions. She is her mother's favorite. Mr. Collins, Mr. Bennet's cousin and heir to the Bennet estate. His patroness is Lady Catherine. He is a ridiculous, pompous clergyman concerned only with impressing others. Charlotte Lucas, a close friend of Elizabeth. She weds Mr. Collins for security, not love, but nevertheless finds happiness in her situation. Lady Catherine de Bourgh, domineering and rich. Lady Catherine meddles in everyone's affairs and cannot tolerate any breach of class rank. Critical Analysis of Pride and Prejudice by Nasrullah Mambrol on February 2021. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. So begins Jane Austen's arguably most enduringly successful novel, one that has been translated into at least 35 languages. At the heart of the novel lies irony. What appears to be so many indeed not be so. These words at the start of the novel are those of the author, who is a subtle commentator throughout the story, but they express precisely the sentiments of the anxious and fussy Mrs. Bennet, hardly noted in the rest of the novel for her wisdom or diplomacy. Her self-appointed task in life is to make sure that each of her 5 daughters secures a suitable, that is, a financially sound, preferably very rich husband. Our observations reflect the key concern of Pride and Prejudice, the crucial importance of money and property in influencing human activity and relationships. The 20th century British poet, playwright and critic Winston Hughes Auden summed up the qualities pithily and brilliantly encapsulated in Mrs. Bennet's opening words at the start of Pride and Prejudice. In his letter to Lord Byron, 1936, he wrote of Jane Austen, "The 20th century, you could not shock her more than she shocks me. Beside, her joy seems innocent as grass. It makes me uncomfortable to see an English spinster of the middle class describe the amorous effects of brass, reveal so frankly and with such sobriety the economic basis of society." Critical appreciation of Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen is a 19th century melodrama about Mrs. Bennet's determination to have her 5 daughters married to elegant suitors in England before they become old maids without any estate to their names. During a catastrophic event that was saved by the prideful Mr. Darcy, who towards the end of the book ends up marrying one of her daughters. In this critique of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, I'll analyze her reason for writing the melodrama in the form of novel, the themes within, and her diction. Jane's reason for writing the book was to present the lives of young women in England during the 19th century to centuries to come, but she wanted to give the audience a visual of their wonders and agony through her own voice. The book also illustrated the atmosphere during the time, for many of the events that took place during the time are balls and card games. An excellent example of this was when the girls were invited to Mr. Bingley's ball, page number 10 in the novel, for he was ready to marry and was looking for that one woman that would make him happy, and he found it in Jane Bennet. Furthermore, Jane's reason was also to give her audience an inside look at what was happening within her life. for she places herself into the pages almost as if she was Elizabeth for women like Jane and not like women today. They relied on marriage as a form of wealth and stability. Moreover, in the case of Elizabeth, I loved how her father agreed with her on not taking Mr. Bennet. সব গোছা তারপরে এটা করো
অন পজ দে দুইটা তিনটা মাছ ঠিক করব কামটা
এই দুইটা তিনটা
হ্যাঁ
একটা 59
তো
এটা করতে 5 মিনিট লাগবে
হ্যাঁ 5 মিনিট লাগবে